So we ought to get going here. Let me get the computer screen arranged a little better here. There we go. So I call this to order. The consent agenda has the minutes on it. Is there any comments on it? I have one change. In 5.5, it says end user is breathing in the gas, and that might imply you're breathing methane, and I think that's not accurate. You know, to change to say the end user is breathing combustion byproducts or something like that. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Looks unanimous. Announcements. Our next meeting is June 10th. And then council update, Tanya.
You know, I don't think I have a whole lot that is climate specific. We are just starting to think about the, you know, how best to make sure that everyone is up to speed on the request that will be coming forward on the USDA program pretty soon. But other than that, the council right now is primarily focused on the budget and some other issues that are up in front of it at the moment. So I don't think I have very much to report on the climate side.
Nope.
Tanya, was there much? I know after Stu's report, there weren't a lot of questions during the meeting. Did you hear any other feedback?
Not so much, other than just that we will, the council is going to have to approve moving forward with the USDA program as its own standalone. So that's going to show up on our agenda, I think in June. And so we're just thinking about how to make sure, because it might be a little bit of a complex program. And so how do we make sure that that the information is able to be taken up pretty quickly by people who are not engaged in this type of work and in these conversations that we're in all the time.
Is that the energy retrofit loan program? Or is that something else?
Go ahead, Stu.
Maybe this is a good time for my staff update.
Okay.
So yeah, of course, there's a lot of different programs going. I know we were a little short on time tonight, so I'm not going to go down the whole list as usual, but the main thing that I have to impart is that we did get approved the letter of intent that I wrote over a year ago that was initially denied because they ran out of funds. They subsequently approved a couple weeks ago. And I've been trying to put the pieces in place since then to get us to make a formal application. So they've essentially green-lighted us as a project. We need to get everything together that we need to submit, which is very extensive. We have a lot of it done already. It's going to be very similar to the ERA program that Bob and I spoke to a few meetings back. And the main difference is that the funding source is different. Rather than the city capitalizing the program, we'd be getting a 0% loan from the USDA, which is actually a loan to the utility. So this is a rural utility program that we're applying to, and the hope is that we will be able to put that program together. And we've got approval to borrow $10 million to put into local energy efficiency loans. So the downside of that is that the application is due July 6th. It's possible we might be able to get an extension on that. And the double downside is that I'm going to need the help of legal and finance, two of the most stressed departments right now. So hopefully I'll be able to take the bulk of it on myself. But the key step that needs to come at the end is taking a resolution to council that formally creates the program. And then once we have that, we can submit the application. So in a nutshell, I guess. Any questions about that particular thing without diving into great detail?
I'm just wondering if you have things that you want this commission to do in support of that, or is that entirely a staff item?
Well, yeah. So once I have a revised program document, I'll be able to say a lot more about what is needed. But generally speaking, we're going to need to win over some support from all the city council and preferably, community actors and whatnot as well. But it doesn't have to be a big community production. It's just a staff program at this point, but we definitely don't want to get it to council and then have a problem come up. So I think once we have the program dialed in, and this is a program I designed, I think 18 months ago, and then Bob and I retooled it to work with much less money because we thought we didn't have access to any funding. So now we have to retool it again to go back to its initial glory. So this is going to be my main task if I can get out from the sort of ancillary projects that are always falling on my desk and start working on this. My hope is that starting tomorrow, I'm going to be really diving into it. I've got a request out to finance to give me a hand with it. We've had some initial conversations that seemed really good. I think we have all the pieces in place. So there's nothing I need from the commission in this moment, but if all goes well, it's going to move really fast. So what I'd appreciate is if I send you an email about it to go ahead and read whatever the documentation is. And if we need to do any advocacy to community or council, then we'll arrange for that at that time.
Great. Don't hesitate.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Stu, I think I did see, as Tanya mentioned, it's on the 6-1 agenda for the city council.
Yeah, it was on the look ahead. I think Elizabeth rescheduled it, so it may not be fresh on the website, but the document that council uses, I think, should say that it's been postponed because it certainly is not in the packet for next week.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not in the packet for the end of the second meeting in May.
Yeah. And it may be June 15th. We might not, because June 1st packet deadline is really not that far out. So honestly, I'd be surprised if I have everything ready for June 1st. I don't think I will.
Okay, thanks, Stu.
Yeah.
Was there anything else? Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know Stu knows, but I wanted to say that I'm very happy.
I can hardly hear you, Bob.
You can hardly hear me. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. I'm on a different computer, so that's probably part of it. Just wanted to say that I'm happy to help in any way I can, Stu. So just give a shout if I can help out.
Okay. Are there other announcements from any of the commissioners? Whoops.
Can I have one other announcement I was going to make that I forgot about, which is Bridget has been continuing to work out new content on the website, and we're hoping to very soon launch an induction cooktop program. The idea was to get that going by the end of this month. And we ordered a couple of induction cook plates, just single burner ones that we're going to donate to the Library of Things. And we have the go ahead to let Ashlanders know about that before the program is live, because obviously that program's for all of Jackson County. But we are hoping that Ashland residents will take it to heart and, do the experiment of see what it's like to fry an egg and boil some water with one of these things, and then tap into our program. So that was the other main thing I wanted to say. Thanks.
Well, just responding to that, Bob and I actually had a chat about induction cooktops, and Bridget, you might want to reach out to the both of us together and see if there's any wisdom in what we've learned.
Yeah, very great. Thanks. Very telegraphic. Thanks, Rick. Important.
Okay, so Stu, I assume you're done with the staff update for now?
I can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there announcements from any of the other commissioners?
I just want to thank Stu for his report that he gave to the council. And it was great to see the trends there and nice, short, concise messaging.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Yeah. Especially the front end message about fossil gas. I very much appreciated that. I have continued to be in contact with APRC about the pool, and they have again put it off. My plan is if they keep putting it off and not doing anything, that's not our problem. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I sit on the city budget commission as well, and just 2 days ago, I guess, Michael Black and 2 of the commissioners came and gave a presentation to the Citizens Budget Commission, and they outlined their goals. And one of their goals had to do with environmental.
Yeah, I can hardly hear you.
Sorry, is that better? I forgot to hold up
so
my
much
microphone.
better.
Sorry. One of their goals, I was just saying that I sit on the Citizen Budget Committee as well, along with Tanya and other counselors, of course. And Michael Black and 2 of the commissioners from the Parks and Recreation Commission came and made a presentation to the commission, and they listed their goals, their top goals of about half a dozen goals, maybe fewer. One of them that stood out was their commitment to environmental sustainability and to a greenhouse gas inventory and reduction. So they clearly seem to have to be taking this on board, and I hope that we'll see some action towards it in this next fiscal period.
Jeff?
I saw a separate presentation by Michael Black and the lead commissioner, and they again addressed the issue of climate change. And Michael Black summarized by saying that right now they didn't have the money to rebuild the pool. So it's kind of really open-ended at this point.
Okay, and Tanya, did you have your hand up too?
Yeah, just to follow on behind Jeff, I think what we're looking at is the fact that that project has been delayed, not so much that there's a lack of willingness to come talk to us about it. Just the financial realities and other realities are putting that project on the back burner for a bit, is my impression anyway.
Right, that's my presumption as well. And so I'm not going to be pushing on them until they come back to me. Or we have some other intelligence that it's something we need to raise our own priority about. Let's see, Gary, you took on a number of coordination roles with 20 is Plenty and the small engine and transportation chapter review and all that. Can you give us a very short update on where those 3 things are? I can't hear you.
Unmuted. The 20 Plenty's kind of been reformatted. Not that it's changed in any dramatic way, but it's been more generalized to Vision Zero, which is the idea that we shouldn't allow the transportation system to cause fatalities or serious injuries. And that applies not just to bicycles and walking, but all modes of travel, which then logically 20's Plenty is a part of that because it effectively lowers the speed, which lowers the effective damage done when people are struck or when they struck a fixed object in an automobile. Anyway, that's where that one's at. I believe
as you go through these, can you say when the commission might next hear something about this? It's substantive.
The CPC might hear about it.
Yes.
It is possible that the CPC will be asked to recommend to the council that the Vision Zero be endorsed. I questioned whether the CPC would have a real interest in that topic because of its more generic application to the transportation system. So I wasn't pushing for that. I figured that the Transportation Commission can move that forward to the city council and the city council can endorse it, and then we move on to the other. In terms of the small engine and gas powered lawn and garden equipment more generally, I've been advocating with the Parks Commission for them to do something. Their response to date has been to do an inventory, as Bob alluded to. I keep hoping that they will set some sort of date-specific time frame for them to phase that equipment out, but they seem reluctant to do so. I think Michael Black's happy to undertake the inventory. He's not so confident about doing anything with it, but clearly there are members on the Parks and Recreation Commission that are committed to environmental sustainability and reducing the Parks Department's impact on climate. So I think it may take more time to get where we want to go and where we need to go, but that's all a part of what we're working on, right? I mean, nothing happens yesterday. It all will happen in the future. Overall, in the transportation issue, I haven't heard anything back from either the Conservation and Climate Outreach Committee nor the Transportation Commission in their review of the urbanization and transportation section of the SEEP update or the SEEP implementation plan, either one. So I believe that they have those scheduled on some future agenda, but I haven't heard.
Okay, thank you. Let's see.
Rick, if I may,
Yes,
just real quickly.
please.
I was at that budget committee presentation. I just wanted to mention that I distinctly heard Michael Black indicate that assessment, the greenhouse gas assessment, was going to be the first step in assessing their systems and their plans and that sort of thing. So I think that there's a strong effort. It's just getting started, but I think it's I think we can expect good things out of it.
Yeah, the more challenging thing, and I ask that if any of you have contacts with the Ashland School District to share those with me. The Parks Commission is relatively easy given that Julian served on that board. So he was basically able to inform me as to which commissioners might be most receptive to the notion of phasing out gas-powered lawn and garden equipment, but I don't have a similar contact with the Ashland School District. And ideally, we'd be moving on that front as well as on SOU.
Well, the election is about to occur. So once that happens, that might be helpful to you or not.
Right. We'll see. Thanks.
I don't think, I didn't see any other hand go up. Let's see. I don't believe we have any representatives from other commissions, and I didn't hear about any public forum. So we can save all that time and move on. I believe, Ray, you are taking down the action items this time. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and is there a volunteer for next time?
I'll do it next time.
Gary, thank you. Commissioner recruitment, as you all presumably are aware, Julian decided not to reapply. And so we have 2 open slots. If they're, and we have been talking about perhaps having the council liaison move out of having a voting role. It's unusual for the liaison to have a voting role. So should we fill 2 of the slots, we can probably move things so that there's actually 3 slots. In any case, if anybody is watching this and would like to join the commission, I encourage you to apply. Let's see, formal planning, right?
Okay. We have coming up in July, we have still the TAP master plan and the storm drain master plan going before council for adoption. We've provided input on both of those, but I haven't seen a draft of the TAP yet. So I'll probably ask Scott if he's got something that I can look at before then. I did have some questions on the pool, but we addressed that. I think I'm just going to put it's TBD, you know, it's on hold for now due to lack of funding. And I think that's all we really had to, for tracking right now. Last month, we did have a question about the 10-year electrical study, and we talked about getting through the budget first. And so I'm sure we're going to revisit when that might start in lieu of other priorities.
So Tanya, is it fair to assume that will be July rather than June? That the budget will be a done deal?
The new fiscal year is starts on July 1st. So it by law, we have to be done with it in June. And we have to have our new budget passed ahead of that July 1st deadline. So it'll be done in June. Our next meeting is tomorrow, and then we'll kind of see how that goes in
Right.
terms of whether that process will extend in any way.
Okay, so June 10th is our next meeting, and so I'm not anticipating any of the things that are pending the end of the budget cycle to be ready by June 10th.
I think that might be a reasonable assumption. Stu, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, not really. Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that by the time we get to June, the budget's going to be pretty well locked in, or hopefully so anyway. So it may not be final, but I think we'll know pretty well where things stand.
Right. So the budget committee creates or develops a recommendation to the council. The budget committee doesn't approve the budget. The council has to approve it. And so there's a timing issue where the goal is to have the budget committee hopefully finish up its work tomorrow, complete its recommendation, and then it could come back to council at the first meeting of June for approval. If anything happens with that, it can push to the middle of June for the second meeting in June for approval by council. But the approval by council of the budget has to happen in June.
Right. Okay. Where am I here?
Yeah, that was it, Rick.
Okay, now let's just move on to Eugene fossil gas. Jeff?
Okay, would it be possible to share those 5 or 6 slides, Elizabeth? So the last meeting, we talked about this consortium of environmental activist groups had put together a letter, and we're in the process of sending it to the Eugene City Council. That happened a few days after our last meeting. So in the meeting materials, you have a copy of that letter, and I put together 4 or 5 slides to just quickly summarize it. So I'll walk through that very, very quickly. The people that put this together included this entity called Breach Collective, which is primarily a legal activist organization. Also included Sierra Club, 350 Eugene, and a number of other organizations active in Oregon. So the just quick summary, the Northwest Natural Utility Franchise Agreement, we have a Vista, they have Northwest Natural. They basically tried to negotiate for 2 years. They had 3 extensions. They failed to reach an agreement. And the legal conclusion in this letter was that Eugene has existing regulatory authority to limit or prohibit natural gas infrastructure outside the franchise agreement. So that was kind of the key point. This letter also had numerous footnotes and references. So for anyone as we move forward who's an attorney or wants to get into more detail, there's a lot of supporting documentation there. So moving forward, their proposal for Eugene was both short-term and long-term. Short-term, enact a moratorium on permits for new gas infrastructure and connections. They claim the city of Eugene has the legal authority to do that under Oregon law, which is referenced here. Longer term, pursue what they call permanent mechanisms to ban or limit natural gas infrastructure and connections through rulemaking, and that would be done through the city council, and the basis would be primarily on safety and city's authority to regulate things like that impact the health and safety of neighborhoods. So indoor air quality, the hazards associated with natural gas explosions, and so on and so forth. So that's a quick summary. I have calls into these guys that if anything changes with Eugene, I'll be notified. The city council has not taken up this in any way, shape, or form since this letter was sent about a month ago.
Jeff, when you and I had a chat with the Breach Collective, they had offered to come and give a presentation to CPC. So I'm wondering, this is a question for the whole commission, whether you're interested in having such a presentation, and Jeff, whether you've had any follow-up about that.
No, I haven't, but that is an open offer from these guys.
So how does the commission feel? Does anybody have an opinion about whether, these guys seem very knowledgeable to me, but whether we want to spend the commission time on that or not is the question. Ray?
I think it is useful information that they have, but I don't know if their presentation would go beyond what they've done with Eugene in terms of providing us additional information. I think at this point, I'm waiting to see if Eugene's going to test some of their legal opinions.
Gary?
I concur with Ray.
Okay. And I will defer that for now. Let's see what happens. Let's see. So Jeff, you're done with the 5.4?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know who the lead is on 5.5, but the path off of natural gas is the next topic.
I would nominate Bob or Ray.
Well, I guess I was going to nominate you since you had the principal pen.
Hey, you want me to say something? I could start, Rick. I think the main thing here, if people have had time to read it, is just, we've gone through 3 meetings or so to reach this point, and I think it's a better document than where we started. I think the main thing here is that the 5 elements that we identified as a path forward, with some owners, seems like what we need to do. And I guess I'd be interested to know if there's something that the commission feels is missing from here, or something that doesn't belong on here. If we agree that this is these 5 areas are what we should pursue, then I think we'd like to dig into how we get these accomplished.
Well, my general feedback is that we need to be a little cautious about overcommitting what the commission can do with our own individual hands. Like when I'm looking at something like complete a fossil gas inventory, I'm wondering what that really means and whether it is one of those things where recruiting people beyond the commission is a sensible thing to do.
Oh yeah, I think in terms of getting these elements done, it can broaden out beyond the commission, and we'll need to, as for the example that you just mentioned. But it's really just saying, and we have to lay out a timeline as well, right? We can't obviously work on all 5 of these at once. But
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
But just the last part, as far as the education piece, I think that's going to come up later in some of the additional items we want to discuss in the proposal for fall. So, you know, there's some overlap there.
I was just going to say that in Rick's outline of the SEEP update or implementation plan, he laid out some specific 5-year timeframes for things to happen. And I think it would be at least consistent if we maintained that approach. So rather than short, medium, and long term, we kind of set those out in some sort of priority level, much as you were suggesting we need to, Ray, that we need to dig into kind of the details. It would be helpful, I think, to understand how the sequencing, and probably also, given the breadth of some of those tasks, an idea how they might happen, who, at least, if not, a budget cost. If we could get, truthfully, our work's going to depend upon change, and change typically either happens voluntarily through regulation or through some sort of incentive or cost. And to the degree that we can be more specific on those, it might help us to get to the next step of actually doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the pathway to reduce or get off fossil fuel, this is a multi-year, maybe a decade, to get there. So again, agreeing on the items we need to work on, and then getting into the details and the timeline and the who, the what, etc.
Tanya?
Yes, thanks, Rick. So when I look at these 5 elements, it seems, I mean, I would agree with Ray that the element number 1, I think we're maybe taking up in terms of that later conversation today, but there's a conversation happening, a bigger conversation around engagement with the community, with potentially fossil gas being kind of at the top of that list. Element number 2 seems as it's already well underway with Jeff. And I would imagine, Jeff, it seems like you're planning to stay involved with that and bring us information as it comes available from these other partners. And then in terms of element number 4, evaluate Ashland's electric grid capacity. Is that something, it seems like that would be something to be looked at in the utility planning process, right? Because
Yes.
that's a big part of my interest in the utility planning process, to make sure that that utility can actually handle what we're trying to have happen for it, and to handle it well. And then, which then leaves the, if it seems like the piece that's left, or the 2 pieces that are left, are the fossil gas inventory, right? Which might help us answer element number 5, which is, where should we focus our energy, right? So I wonder is that helpful at all? We kind of have 3 of them in motion already. If we then focused on how to address element number 3 in terms of, understanding where are the pressure points in this system, would that help us decide how to move forward?
Bob?
Yeah, no, I agree with much of what has already been said, and Tanya's lead on this. I think in putting our heads together in moving this issue forward, we were trying to lay out a pathway, not a detailed set of steps and to be carried out. I think the intention really was to lay out the principal elements, and then identify people that were going to be taking leadership on each of those elements, but not do the work all by themselves. They would lay out, a plan and try to and figure out how to move forward on that. They are all interrelated, and I think Tanya, pointed out how they interrelate. The inventory is something that we talked about before in this meeting. And I remember that also was one of the learnings from Eugene that I think that they presented, is that the importance of having coming up with the gas inventory. I think two principal takeaways that I remember from the last meeting was it was important to understand the gas inventory, and also to have strong community engagement. You have to have community engagement in moving this forward. And I think those are really very important. I think I think a gas inventory will help us to identify priorities. I think it'll also help to work on with the engagement of the community, because while the whole community or many members of the community are using gas in some fashion, there are bigger users and there are smaller users, and there are natural allies, and there are natural people who are going to feel that this is too far to reach. And I think that just needs to shape the dialogue and the engagement going forward. So I don't see this as a blueprint or a straitjacket, but I see this as a departure point for us as a commission, being on the same page that we want to do this, and these are the principal things that we need to work on, and we need to be working with others to get them to move them forward.
So one way to look at this is the first four elements are really about collecting, collating information. Even putting the plan together for the electric utility is gathering information and putting it all together. So those first four elements are primarily really understanding where we are and starting to put together more detailed plans. The last element here, element 5, is a very, very rough template for implementation. So these are some of the measures that could be taken, in the context of the previous 4 elements. That's kind of the way I was looking at this.
Tanya?
And I think that there's definitely some wisdom in that, and also that there are already programs in place. So we're going to be kind of figuring out that next step while this outreach is really lifting up the programs that we do have that can help people right now. And so I think it's going to be an interesting process of implementing and then adapting as more information comes in, and we get a clearer read on where the focus point needs to be. But I think that I've thought that these were the 5 components that seemed very necessary in all of this, and I wonder, is there any concern about those 5 components, or does anybody think there's something missing?
I could chime in. I think this, a lot of this adds up to what, the direction I think we all know we're going. As far as the gas inventory, I think we have a fair bit of 50,000 foot information. We don't have a lot of household level data, but we know how many gas meters there are. We know the primary uses. We know what the total volume is. So there's a lot we can work with. And having some sort of adopted policy will help us start working with the biggest users. I think that's, getting any kind of policy platform that everyone can buy into will be an important step to engaging those big users. The one thing I see that was not really in here, and it's possible I overlooked it, is I think we're going to need upfront to do quite a bit of planning around equity and how are we going to help our existing gas customers do this in a way that's not going to cause extra burden, because that's a huge concern, not only for those folks, but also for the city council. And I think we need to have that upfront. And maybe it fits in with one of these 4 first elements, or maybe it's an additional one. I don't know. But that was the main, I think, lens sort of that I was hoping to see added here.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, and I don't mean that to be critical either. I think this is a totally sensible starting point. But that's, I know, an issue that's going to come up as soon as we take this to the next step. So we may as well have a response for it.
Ray?
Yeah, thanks, Stu. I would agree, because affordability is one of the key components of moving. The other thing I wanted to say was it's timely because if you read Avista, they're putting out promotional materials for them going net zero, right? And if you look at their details, they're saying, if you look at the facts, people are saying, does this mean we should be getting rid of our gas appliances? And they're saying, no, you do not need to do that. And they're also saying that there isn't enough electrical energy to replace the natural gas energy used for heating and cooling. So that's why we need to go through this and find out the numbers for ourselves, for Ashland, if it would work, or how far can we go?
We have a little tiny bit of extra time on, I think, because we're ahead. So I'll take a minute just to say, I did a really back of the envelope calculation a few months back, and I shared it with some of you. I don't remember who, but essentially looking at our full energy load in Ashland and what would happen if we converted all the gas to electric and if we assume some efficiency gains by making that conversion. And the end result of that was basically about double our electric use from current. And that would include, electrifying all our vehicles, electrifying all our household or building heating and cooling. So it's possible. I'm not going to make a statement regionally that says there's enough electricity to switch completely right now. But I think in Ashland, it's possible, especially with added conservation, which of course we want to continue doing. So anyway, that's just, I wanted to note that because that was actually a graphic we created at one point.
Well, and as part of the electric utility planning, we're going to dive into that. It seems obvious to me that there is a lot of potential for local generation that we have not exercised yet.
Yeah, and I think as far as sizing our local grid, the main design factor is probably going to be our local solar generation more than anything else. So it may be mostly determined by how much solar we want to have. Yeah, I think one other thing I might just throw into these elements here is I think we generally agree that we want to create robust programs to help people use the smartest kind of energy and to use it wisely. But a big question will be, how much do we want to subsidize that? What kind of investment makes sense? If you look at places like Sacramento Municipal Utility, they're pumping tons of money into electrification. Of course, they're a dual fuel utility, but still, I think we want to have an economic consideration here, not only for the electric utility, but also for environmental benefit. So, okay, I will stop now. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
One other comment that I had on this document is that it seems like when you're going to switch fuels, building shell improvements need to be part of that. And I didn't see that reference anywhere in the document. Gary, I think you had your hand up.
Oh, there's a couple things. One, I think, our use of fossil gas instead of natural gas is a important aspect of moving this topic forward to increase the public awareness that there's nothing natural about it. And secondly, I guess it seems to me that from the standpoint of actually changing out gas equipment to electric, that the heat pump water heater is one of the easiest and less disruptive appliances that people can choose. So that seems just as a priori kind of approach to this topic, it would seem that we would benefit from being able to move and advance the public's awareness and interest in that program. And then finally, I think that the inventory that Stu alluded to, as well as the graphic that he prepared and shared with us some meetings back about what happens when we turn off the gas and turn on the electricity, would all be valuable additions to this document, so that if other people are reviewing it, or for as far as that goes internally, we have a better understanding of how that resources being used and the implications of switching from gas to electric. So that is where I'm at.
Okay, so I captured 4 items. Bob, Jeff, and I can discuss whether they fit within the existing element or we have to add something else.
Thank you for your work. It's great to be moving forward on this topic. I know it's of great interest to all of us.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there's going to be another revision of the document and that work is going to start on things like the inventory. Is that a fair summary?
Well, I think we have to lay out, I guess we could, do you want us to add what order we think we should work on the stuff or how much in parallel? I guess I'm not sure what you mean, Rick.
Well, there's been a lot of planning in Ashland that's kind of hand waving, and I'm trying to make this crisp so that we have some idea of how fast this is going to move forward and which pieces of it are going to move forward at that pace.
I would think with Stu's help, when he's done with his other project that he needs for June, we'd like to work on the data we have for inventory. So I think we could go forward with that one. And I think later we'll discuss going forward with the education part too, and communication.
Yeah.
So
And
we
that's
will,
obviously a bigger discussion. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
we'll put together a table for this that kind of shows the current status or progress. So at a glance, we can kind of see where we are in each one of these.
Here we go.
And Tanya, were you about to comment? No? Okay. Good. So I think what needs to be done for fossil gas, we're all pretty much in alignment on. So that's good to hear. So I think we could move on unless there's anything else anybody wants to bring up about 5.5. We can move on to climate resilient Ashland. And so Tanya, I think that's your thing.
All right, thanks, Rick. So I'm assuming that everyone's had a chance to read through this, but I want to just speak very sort of at a very high level of this. The idea for this sort of combined and sort of comprehensive outreach and engagement and education program really came from the understanding that SEEP covers a variety of things that are handled by different commissions, not even just the two climate commissions. So right now we've got the actual climate outreach project that's going on for these 3 months, and over the top of it is the Wildfire Safety Commission's 4-month campaign to have people also be making alterations to their homes and that sort of thing. And yet, wildfire safety is a major element. It's probably, I would say, the biggest adaptation element of the SEEP. And so there's a natural alliance there in terms of bringing those elements together under the climate resilience umbrella. And so the idea that's being brought forward is that we would have essentially each year a plan for each month of what is the focus of that particular month across SEEP. Sometimes it would be wildfire safety improvements that people need to make. Sometimes it might be anything else. It could be fossil gas. It could be how to buy an electric car. It could be anything. And it would be able to be adjusted as it goes, as we go along. So as needs change, those what is planned for each of those months could change in the next year. So the idea is that we've had these two campaigns. The wildfire safety campaign ends at the end of July. The idea is that for this year, we would then pick up with significant engagement work. And when I say we, I mean sort of this group of committees, of citizen commissions, would work together to put information out. And so this year, it sounds like that we might, what we might do is have a big focus on fossil gas starting in August. And then over the course of the fall, work together across Climate Policy Commission, the Climate or Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission, the Wildfire Safety Commission, and the Transportation Commission, working with staff to identify what is the programming for next year, so that we can hit January with the topics and knowing which commission is going to provide the information for those topics. We've got the website that can move information out. We're hoping that our application gets approved and we get another rare volunteer intern with us. And so basically this proposal is to pull all these pieces together in one integrated place so that Ashland residents are not hearing a whole bunch of different messages at the same time that are kind of pulling them in different directions so that they know what it is to focus on. And one of the elements of this that we've been talking about, because it's been being talked about in the Wildfire Safety Commission, is that it really is, certainly the wildfire issue is an emergency issue. I think I would certainly put forward that climate is at an emergency space. And we have the CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Team, and those are set up by neighborhoods. And so right now the Wildfire Safety Commission is working with the city to figure out, is there a way to deploy the CERT volunteers around this effort to improve wildfire safety in these couple months at the beginning of wildfire season. So wildfire season is going to start very soon, today or tomorrow, or within a couple days, but that campaign goes all the way through the end of July. So there is some potential to leverage some of the other programs at the city if we all come together in under one sort of comprehensive engagement process. Now, this commission would have a limited role in that. It would basically be content for certain months that might be issues particular to this commission, or if there's an engagement effort that this commission needs to do related to a particular policy element that it's trying to move forward, that's where this commission would come in. So this would not be a major lift for this commission, but it would be a mechanism by which this commission could influence what kind of engagement is happening out there that this commission needs to have happen. It's kind of a long way around it. But what would you add, Rick, or anyone else who's been in that conversation? I think Bob maybe has been in a bit.
Well, my summary of it is that the element one with the monthly themes is something that clearly just ought to be done so that there's not a whole lot of stepping over each other, on top of each other. And I'm very interested in what the CERT volunteers think about being deployed for doing something different. And so I look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Yeah, and I think at this point, what we're looking for is it's coming in front of the different commissions. So the Conservation and Climate Outreach Commission has been talking about it already. I know it's being sent out to the Transportation Commission. We've had a meeting that involved me and Stu, and then the commission chairs. And there seems to be a lot of interest and excitement around it, but now is really the conversation with the individual commissions. And so this would be the point to express any concerns or ideas that you would like to be taken forward as the conversations move on. But we want to get a sense, we need to get a sense if this feels like a good direction to be going in working with these other commissions around this engagement element.
Ray?
Yeah, I think working across the commissions is very useful to try to get a unified message. My one concern I have is every month the frequency too much? I know month works nice on a calendar. I'm just wondering maybe the message should stay for 2 months? I don't know.
Well, it depends. I think, the Wildfire Safety Commission has done a spring campaign for the last 3 years to help people get ready for wildfire season. And it would probably be the case that they would still want sort of a spring block, couple months, right? So there may even be mini campaigns within those 10 or 11 months that say, okay, these 3 months we're going to focus on wildfire safety. These 3 months, this next one is going to be about electrifying your home, so that you've got 3 months to work on what is that content, right? As opposed to, it doesn't have to be, wildfire safety is March, right? Given that we have all these different things we want people to do.
Right.
So that would be the point of having those the commission chairs get together and work out that schedule, and then take responsibility for content for particular months or mini campaigns within the year that are multiple months. But it's a really good question, because we don't, while we know how fast we need to move, it's also true that, we can't just, overwhelm people month to month.
Yeah, I saw Gary and then Jeff.
Tanya, have you considered how this program might match up with, say, a major initiative like the electric utility master plan or the transportation plan update? At least in the case of the transportation system plan, I'm reasonably confident that it will include a specific community engagement and involvement program. And it seems to me that it would be ideal if we could move that engagement effort into this kind of a overall citywide process, so that we can basically leverage those resources that are typically grant funded into supporting this program and expanding it. Clearly, absent that, the transportation plan, for instance, will have its own schedule and its own outreach and its own programs, basically to support that planning effort. I'm hopeful that we can kind of be strategic about it and leverage those other related transportation or utility planning, what have you, in a way that we can be more effective. Because most of the time, these kind of planning community involvement projects have little success. And if we can figure out a way to solve that problem and make them more effective, then we as a community will be well served by that.
I'm writing notes. I mean, I think that that's really what we're trying to do, is put these pieces together and leverage, right? I mean, the whole point of this is to leverage the various tools and resources that we have that are being deployed in some way or another, and then fill in the gaps. So I think that that's a very interesting idea, and I will see what that could look like, because certainly if we have the mechanism in place, right, and there's a certain amount in each of these contracts for engagement, we absolutely should be using this, and potentially our contractors should be using this system in that engagement process. We wouldn't want things coming in from the sides, distracting people, or saying, oh, well, that's not related to this, right? Let's get it all in one place where they can really see what they need to engage in, whether that's policy development or whether that's, doing something around their home.
And I guess before I give up the floor, I don't know the timing of the transportation plan kickoff. I only know that the work program is under development or finalization, as it probably is. But it seems that we need to be somewhat out in front of that process in order to engage and explain the importance of mode switching or electrification, so that the community can key in on those particular issues as that plan develops. It's obviously a very complex public relations and public education program. When you look at the city from all the multi-agency and departmental efforts, it is highly complex. We need a staff person, right? We need a communications person on staff to basically help organize and carry this out. We aren't going to get it though, I wouldn't imagine.
Not yet.
Jeff, I think you're next, and then Bob.
Just a couple thoughts. I'm a Firewise coordinator, so we work with the fire department, and there's, I don't know, there's at least 20 of these neighborhoods scattered around Ashland, and they're very, very active this time of year. And these are all people who know their neighborhood quite well. There's social organizations, you know, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary, all of these. So just thinking about the mechanisms, who you talk to and how you get messaging out. Mailings, of course, we all get a bill every month from the city of Ashland. Promotions, open houses, exactly what Gary said about, you know, communications. It needs to be a pretty well thought out program. And then I would just add one more thought. I think water conservation this year is going to be a very, very big topic. So I wouldn't leave that off the list.
Well, it sounds like there's general support for this. And so if that's the case, then the next step will be that these commission chairs get back together with Stu and myself, and we figure out what does the rest of this year look like in terms of content, in terms of delivery, in terms of all of that. And so I think that point around the water conservation piece is well taken. Certainly in August and September, that's going to be a very important process, and we can sort that out. But it seems like there's general support for moving forward with this idea and having the Climate Policy Commission be part of that entity that grouping that figures out what is going to be, you know, the campaign plan essentially for the year. What are the topics that we think need to be brought in front of people? And then we can also be working on what those mechanisms are. So for instance, you know, there's the Ashland Fire and Rescue, they've got a regular column in the paper, right? And so you get to, they sort of is automatic. The CCOC has a column every month in the sneak preview, right? So there are some things that can be brought to bear along with the city's newsletters and along with the web presence and the new website and all that sort of thing. So that's the next step, really, is to figure out what are those mechanisms for communication, what other community entities might help us to spread the word, and what does that look like in terms of potentially this neighborhood level organization.
Bob, I think you were next.
Yeah, but I don't feel like I need to add to what Tanya just said. And I guess other than to just reiterate the fact that I think coordination across the commissions makes a lot of sense. Is that better, Rick? I keep on forgetting to hold my microphone up until I see Rick lead in to try to hear better. I think, you know, coordination certainly makes it's common sense across the commissions. I think the communications challenge and coordinating that, we're trying to make up for a deficiency in the city structure, the city staffing, because we don't have a clear communications control tower or director. And I think also then the other thing that I just wanted to reiterate is CERT is a really, I think, an innovative idea. And there are others as well that we should just be looking for. If there's some way that we can engage the students, high school students that have to do a service project, other kinds of things like that, and then other community organizations that could get involved. I think the point is to try to reinforce with people-to-people contact what might otherwise just be left to written messages that may or may not get read.
Gary?
I was basically following up on with Bob's comment in some ways, but a little more specific. Is there any opportunity to partner with SOU or the Ashland School District, the hospital, OSF? I mean, they are all equally impacted and have an interest in these topics. Clearly, they've got their own special interests that they need to focus on, but maybe there's an opportunity to broaden it so that we get kind of the political establishment, if you will, working in concert on trying to bring about change in the community. This is really not about communication, it's about change.
Yeah, and I think that sorry.
Go ahead. I was just suggesting he was leading into our next topic, but go ahead, Tanya.
That's what I was going to say, is I think that there is some feeding there. But what I would also just add is that that's one of the things the Wildfire Safety Commission has been doing with its campaign, its spring campaign. So you see their displays up in front of the grocery stores, and they're having them be put out on e-news and all sorts of things with local organizations. I think that this could easily build on that, so that folks are kind of seeing it everywhere, right? The new theme of the month and what they need to be doing. So those are good ideas.
Okay, so is there any other commentary on the climate resilient Ashland? If not, I think we will move on to climate action community leadership. It was a relatively lengthy memo that was sent to you folks that was the culmination of a lot of hours of talk amongst the people that put it together. I don't know that it's worthwhile for me to try to summarize it, other than to say that my personal feeling is that we need some way to amplify the efforts of the commissions, and it needs to be done in a context that isn't slowed down by government process. Government process has its place, and it's necessary, particularly when compulsory actions are taken. But most of what needs to happen, in my view, needs to lead with voluntary action on the part of the community. And so that is, although it's a very complex subject, that's my elevator pitch for what's being suggested. But mostly the intent is to listen to what the commissioners have to say and whether they support the general idea or not. So unless Tanya or Stu, if you have anything that you'd like to add as a preface, mostly I'd just like to hear what the commissioners think about the idea. Gary? I can't hear you.
Apologize. Sorry. Once back in the day of land use planning, there were efforts undertaken to do stakeholder interviews, which, a half a dozen people would go out and ask questions and get feedback and share information one-on-one with people. Certainly during COVID, that wouldn't have been possible, but on the horizon, at least, it seems like that kind of community organization and outreach might be practical. We're kind of, in a way, in my discussion, looking at an alternate way of getting people involved and more engaged than simply sending out papers or newsletters or public PSAs, what have you, but rather engaging them one-on-one and using, in our case, a specific format of questions dealing with climate change and their interest in being more resilient, adaptive, and helping to reduce the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. And consequently, that data set basically brings you information about the community. And each stakeholder that is interviewed then simply is asked to give you, as an interviewer, a list of other people who they think should be interviewed. And through that process, ultimately, you engage most of the movers and shakers in the community. And that's really ultimately the kind of people that we need to influence, are the movers and shakers. Those are the people who have real influence with the council. Those are the real people who have influence with business leaders, community organizations, and whatnot. And it would seem that taking a somewhat more strategic approach, given that we're relying upon volunteers for all of this anyway, to kind of have more in-depth discussions as a way to gain more information, but at the same time, gather it in a way that helps us to move forward. I don't have a good description of this process, but you can well imagine yourself going out and interviewing one of your neighbors, say, to find out their views on climate change, and sharing with them information about fossil gas and why it's bad for the environment as well as bad for their health. Why it's important, for instance, to reduce flammable materials in and around your house. Just that whole spectrum of issues related to the changing environment that we live in can be reviewed and discussed in a way that really engages people, as contrasted to just simply offers a one-way communication. I'm offering that as an adjunct possibly, or as a substitute for a more traditional approach to community outreach and information sharing and gathering.
Well, I'm trying to understand whether you think that's consistent with what's being proposed in the memo.
My understanding of the memo is that it's more of a traditional campaign of information sharing. Am I mistaken?
Well, it's not. There was 3 different options for moving forward with amplifying our efforts through the community. And the traditional one was the one that this group was trying to restrict to things where it just had to be done that way, because it tends to be relatively high overhead and takes a long time. And some of the things that you were laying out, I think, are very consistent, certainly with the community coalition approach, which was the 3rd option. And the second option is sort of in between, of trying to amplify existing techniques that the city has, but isn't standing up a whole new organization. So, for example, on page 4, where it's talking about the representation of people on the coalition, as you were talking about various leading members of the community, there's a list of organizations that include the ones that you were just referring to: ASD, SOU, OSF, Asante, Chamber of Commerce, faith-based groups, all these folks. The notion is that they would have some representation in this coalition. But you didn't use the word coalition at all in your description. You did talk about stakeholders, and that is another representation subset. And so that's there. And so that, you touched on a couple of things that are in there, but it didn't seem like you were directly addressing the recommendation that was at the end of the memo, and whether you thought that that was a good recommendation, or whether you don't want to do it that way, or whatever your reaction might be.
Right. I guess what I wanted to share really was that there are a variety of ways to get public input and engage the public in public policy. And traditionally that includes one-way communication. We're informing people, we're surveying them potentially, but mostly we rely upon, as the CCOC does, in writing up information to be consumed by those who read the sneak preview, for instance. This approach requires more intimate involvement and may yield different results, I hope.
Yes.
So I guess it's a little different. It is markedly different in some ways, but is complementary, I think, to what you've written in terms of the community coalition. At least the concept is comparable.
Right.
Methods are different.
That's the
The
part I'm
methods are
trying to
different.
understand, because I feel like what you've been outlining is very consistent with the coalition. Anyway, I want to stop talking and listen a little more.
Right.
I think Bob and Jeff had their hands up.
Thanks. Thanks, Rick. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
So I guess to me, reading the document, I mean, I think a community coalition makes a lot of sense. And if a community coalition already existed, I would certainly recommend that we engage with that community coalition wholeheartedly in order to get the work done. So I guess the question really that you're putting forward here is, do we as the CPC want to foster establishment of an organization, a coalition, and what kind of organization would that be? I mean, at one point you call it an organization, other times it seems like it's not as much of an organization, it's more loose. It could be more formal or it could be more loose, I suppose. And then my question is, what could the CPC do to foster that, to make that happen? And what is, if we're fostering it, does that require involvement of the city council? Does that require or imply approval of the city council to set up something like this that has representation from different city actors? So that sort of process issue of how to get from here to there, because it doesn't already exist, was what I had some questions about. The things that you make a couple of points in there about you mentioned the SEEP, updating the SEEP, and I know we're going to talk about that next. You say that this assumes an update to the SEEP of some sort, and you say several times you talk about an implementation plan, a detailed implementation plan, as almost something that the coalition would prepare or commit to. And I wonder whether either of those things, whether that's loading too much onto a coalition that doesn't yet even exist, to expect them to prepare and then hew to an implementation plan or an updated SEEP. And if that necessarily answers the question that I asked earlier about the role of the city council, because if there's going to be an updated SEEP, the city council, is my assumption, would have to approve an updated SEEP, which goes against what you had said at the outset, Rick. I think that certain things need to be done by the public bodies, and other things in public meetings, and other things need to be done by community organizations. So I guess I just wasn't clear. I think it's a great idea. I wish it were already existed. How to help it to exist, and what our role would be in helping it to exist is without triggering other kinds of even bigger processes, onerous processes, was my question. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Tanya, did you want to respond directly to Bob, or?
You can first. I was going to respond to Bob when you're done.
Well, I don't really have too much to say, because this is a concept paper.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers. I too am concerned about what, in particular, what the city attorney would have to say about this with respect to public outreach law and how much we can participate in that kind of thing. I'm also not entirely sure what the SEEP update role will be and what goes forward to the coalition and what comes back from the coalition. I can imagine that working in several different ways. And so let me conclude because I want to hear what Jeff has to say with just saying my personal strong belief is that this commission has nowhere near enough members to do everything that needs to be done for Ashland to get to its climate goals. And so something like this needs to happen. And exactly what it should be, I think is going to require more discussion by a number of different actors. So Jeff?
I generally like the approach, but I did have a question, and maybe I'm just reading between the lines, but I kind of sense that some real skepticism on option one. And am I reading too much into that? We don't have any confidence, or we have a low level of confidence in this traditional government mechanism to address these?
Well, I think my own feeling, and I think it's shared by the other authors, but there's two of them here that can object if I have this wrong, is that traditional mechanism, as outlined in the document, is fairly heavyweight. It tends to rely on consultants, particularly in Ashland, because we just don't have the staff capacity to run them. And so they end up being expensive and taking a long time. And particularly for something as large as climate change, we need to adopt a more continuous process where we can get results quick and continuously. Tanya?
Yes, so I think there's a couple things. One is that we have these three options, but the question isn't being which of these three that we do, not which one of these three, but it's which of these three. And we've already had the conversation about the integrated campaign. So that's one element, that's an engagement piece. And I think, Gary, that's where we could potentially, if CERT or some other neighborhood-based process is put in place, that's how you have those person-to-person interactions, right? That's why the conversation is happening around that integrated campaign potentially being a neighborhood-scaled campaign across the city. This other piece around the coalition is really about what are the commitments that initially these other major actors in town will take, because we knew in developing the SEEP that the city couldn't actually hit these targets just doing work within the city. Right, there has to be commitments. We saw commitments with the school district in their new building projects. You know, how are these major entities integrating what's in the SEEP into their own operations? And alongside that is, you know, what are the commitments of different organizations to help with us, to help the community implement? You know, what are these commitments that we could then put potentially in the update to the SEEP in the implementation process as being led by one of the other entities in town, so that we can get the city's piece focused on the part the city can actually manage and control, and other elements that are maybe not moving as well forward could be led by the communities that are in a better position, or the entities in a better position to do that leading. One of the things I think, which kind of leads into the next conversation, is we need to come together and figure out what is our process for the SEEP update that the council is expecting. Because one of the things we could do is convene this group as part of the process of updating the SEEP, to say what of this can you commit to that we should include in this implementation plan. And then an ongoing coalition is the implementation mechanism that gets developed in that planning process. But we haven't finalized how we're going to update the SEEP at this point. But if we do go down that path where it is primarily implementation and possibly some adaptation, shoring up the adaptation side, then we would have, this commission would have a sanctioned reason for convening that group of people in the updating of the SEEP as a first step of potentially creating a coalition for implementation.
So I guess I'd like to add on just a little bit on that. We could go forward with a relatively traditional way, although there's no money for a consultant to help us do that, and it's not a trivial amount of work. My advice would be not to try to have volunteers do all that work. So I lost my train of thought. So I think, Jeff, you had your hand up, and then Ray. Oh, Ray? I can't hear you, Ray.
I was on mute. A little bit similar to what Tanya was hitting on. I tend to think of the results we need. And so we're trying to implement actions that are in the SEEP to achieve the goals of the SEEP. And it seems to me that to achieve those actions, you need a little bit of each. But I'd be curious to walk through some of the priorities you have listed on page 4 and see how would we achieve those and who do we need to achieve those. Some of the things can be done by option 1, right? You make some change to your housing or planning, and that gets implemented. But there's other things that are voluntary or other things that we need direction from because of limited resources. That would help me understand who needs to get involved to achieve the result of the action.
Okay. Well, let me just take one that's listed as, sorry.
And sorry, just a second thing. We're not the first city to try to attack this. So are other cities following similar coalition type of things? Or do we need to look at that to see what cities have made good advances in their climate plans? Or are they basically still where we are, where we've got the plan and they're still working on implementation?
Well, let me do the second one first, because if you scroll past page 5, there's a list that Laurie Kaplan put together of various coalitions that already exist in Oregon.
The tables, yeah.
Yes. I haven't personally gone through all those to be able to answer your wider question, but it is certainly the case that this would not be the first one.
Right.
As far as your first question goes, the priorities, these are the same priorities that I have recapped several times at various commission meetings since last August. They've been wordsmithed a little and revised slightly, but the essence of them is no different than what we had said last August. And so the first one is buildings, particularly fossil gas and energy efficiency. And it says start here because of, I believe, a consensus in this commission that it's the biggest thing that the city's not doing that needs to happen. And so if we take that priority and then look at the representation list, if we go to, let's say, citizens, citizens who are members of the coalition would be people that know about induction cooking, just to take an example, and would be able to go and table at events. And then maybe there's, and the intent, I think, is not for the coalition to take on a lot of discrete activities, but rather to be something like SoCan Ashland that would take on such a activity of going out and actually demonstrating how induction cooking works and how much better it is than fossil gas and that sort of thing. So that
So that could be where the coalition helps with the education because the action is voluntary, but yet the city could offer incentive.
yes,
So
I think that's a fair statement. And so doing that education through people who are not part of these commissions with our very restricted ability to meet and plan and execute. And the number of people that can be on a commission is very restricted. I believe that there is a large number of Ashland citizens who are very worried about climate change and would do a lot if only they knew what to do. And this coalition would provide a way to focus that energy and make it so that it's the topic of conversation within the community. So that's one of the representation items, but I want to address another one, which is the stakeholders. In order to deal with fossil gas, as in the memo that we discussed earlier in this meeting, there's a number of stakeholders. The HVAC dealers are the ones that are actually at the point of decision when a gas furnace stops working. And there's various things that we have talked about off and on over the last few months about how they can play a key role in fuel switching. And so they are a critical stakeholder. The plumbers, because that's who deals with gas water heaters, are very similar in that respect. And then there's all the climate groups. And again, I'm just referring back to the memo that we've already discussed at some length. The notion is that this kind of coalition is a way to amplify the efforts, bring more people in, and actually get this done, because the way that the city processes and commissions are set up is not conducive to a lot of rapid action.
So maybe we send out something of what groups around the town want to get involved in implementing these actions, helping to assist implementing these actions.
Right, I think that's one of the primary reasons for having a coalition, is to provide a focal point for what you're just talking about. Bob?
So I think that was a helpful illustration, Rick, about what's what's the advantage of having a community coalition go forward on any one of these topics. And I certainly see the advantage of that for buildings in the way that you said. You'd want to have outreach and engagement and input by HVAC contractors, by plumbers, by developers, by real estate agents, by restaurants. There's a whole host of different kinds of stakeholders that you'd want to get involved and work with. And I think that's kind of what we were hitting with the whole idea of a path off natural gas, is that engagement strategy is to build that out for that topic. I guess where I have less certainty, and I'm absolutely certain that that's the right way forward. I guess where I have less certainty is whether a single organization or a single coalition that would draw on those people, and then the same, critical stakeholders for transportation, which will be very different, or likely to be very different, or for energy source. There may be some overlap, but there's probably a lot of ways in which those who are going to be key actors in any one of those topics are not going to have a whole lot to say on some of the others. So I wonder whether a more manageable approach is to have not a coalition, but coalitions for each one of these topics, because in fact, that's what we're talking about, is how to move forward. So instead of just a path off natural gas, it's a path off fossil gasoline.
Yeah. The authors of that actually discuss what you're referring to. And the concept that we've had so far is to have action teams that are focused on, let's say, transportation versus buildings, because as you say, the actors are different. But there's a lot of commonality too. If you were to take SOU as an example, they have a fleet of gasoline burning vehicles, as well as a huge natural gas boiler to provide district heating to their campus. And so I think there's substantial commonality as well as differences depending upon what topic you're actually talking about. And the action team concept is the label that we put on dealing with that difference and commonality. And the other thing is that we are way over time. Really, unfortunately, our meeting got short this month. And so I'm sure there's lots more to be said. I'm not hearing objections, but rather what I think of as refinements to the concept. But I want to be sure that that's true, that the commission is got a lot of detailed questions about how this could possibly work and that kind of thing, and that's fine. But I want to understand whether we have a consensus, whether moving forward with the concept is something that the commission wants to do, because as it's currently sketched, CPC plays a key role in getting this thing kicked off. So right now, rather than going into more details about all the things that I don't have the answers for, and I doubt any of the three authors that are here have answers to, if anybody really objects to going down this road, now would be a good time to speak up. Gary?
I feel that the approach that was outlined in the gas-powered lawn and garden equipment, where we targeted, thank you, Bob, different agencies and saw them as being leaders in change, is more easily managed, I should say. And I think is more to scale with our abilities as volunteers. I'm concerned that the coalition concept would be all-consuming for the CPC, that then becomes the vehicle that drives everything else. And certainly the option one is I think, a proven approach to government change. Is we figure out what's, as a commission, what's practical to move forward through the city council. We make a recommendation to them to consider it in a public hearing, and they adopt it, refine it, or reject it as appropriate. I think there are a lot of issues, I hope, that are like that can be expedited through a very straightforward traditional approach. The issue that I think is most problematic for us and for the community as a whole is the whole reliance upon voluntary change. That's a sticky wicket, and I don't know, other than PR and public education and time, that we can successfully expect that to yield much results. It's the tough one. If we're expecting people to voluntarily move from natural gas to some other heat source, that's going to take time and a lot of energy and effort. I think the CPC at this point should be focusing on moving forward those things that the council independently can act upon and bring about change.
Okay. How, Tanya?
Yeah, I see the CPC's role as implementing SEEP, and SEEP has a number of strategies that the city can't implement. It simply doesn't have the ability to do it, and its authority is limited enough in terms of even mandating things that there are just a whole swath of things that the city can't do on its own. And so what I think this is doing, and Rick, correct me if this is wrong, is that this is creating a way to invite leadership from the community around the implementing the pieces that the city can't really implement all that easily or at all on its own. And so my hope would be that CPC would convene this, and then it would sort of take on a life of its own, with community leadership from these other anchor institutions that CPC is participating with, but is not carrying. Because I would share that same concern, Gary, that it could become all consuming. But I think if we're clear about what our role is and what we're trying to do with it, we have a pathway forward that I think could get us to some good implementation elements. And that's always the question that comes up in planning: is do you just plan for what the municipality can do, or do you plan for the whole community? And SEEP is, of course, a whole community plan, but we don't have the implementation piece yet that includes the leadership from the rest of the community. So, and we don't know what it would look like exactly, because the people who would run it are not here yet. And so I wouldn't worry too much about what is exactly the structure, because if they come together and help identify what the implementation steps are and that this ongoing effort is needed, then they're going to be the ones to really decide, is it working groups? Is it one single group? Is it some combination? That kind of thing. I don't think we have to worry about that at the moment.
Yeah, and I'd like to emphasize one of the things that Tanya was referring to is that the concept is not that CPC is going to run this coalition. That's not it at all. If that's where we end up, if we're more than just one organization that's represented in the coalition, then I would share your concerns, Gary. It's just not going to work. We've got enough to do as it is. But as things currently stand, I don't see how Ashland's going to achieve its climate goals. And I feel this is a way to amplify nascent community effort. We are way over, and I'm going to have to just move some topics to the next meeting as it is. What I'm hearing is that Gary has some significant concerns. I haven't heard the same level of concern from the rest of you. My thought right at the moment is that we're going to need to bring this back at the next meeting and allocate more time than we had tonight. And is that a reasonable plan from the rest of the commission? Are you thinking, yes, we need to talk about this more, or this is just DOA? Okay, I'm seeing at least the majority of the commission wanting to talk about it more.
I like the idea of going through examples of some of the actions and how we would then need to involve people, because then that helps my thought process of, okay, that's what we need to do. So how would we go about doing that?
I get that. And there was many hours on the part of the authors to put this together that we were talking, and sometimes things got to the point where we were just shaking our heads and saying, this just isn't going to work. I had no expectation that we were going to get to the point, particularly with the limited meeting time tonight, where everybody was comfortable with going forward with this as the plan of record. So I'm going to bring it back at the next meeting. Now, as far as the SEEP update strategy goes, we don't have time to delve into this in depth. I did not prepare a document. My concern is that we're not all pulling in the same direction. Once again, because of the limited number of people and the limited amount of time that we have, my feeling is that we need to have more or less a single coherent document that is saying what is the path forward for this commission and how it thinks the community at large is going to go forward. And so I have gone through the path forward for natural gas. I think it's well written. I think it, as we discussed earlier, it says roughly what needs to be done. It's not consistent with the outline for SEEP 2021. And so I'm going to want to bring that back because at the next meeting to have that discussion, because I'm at a little bit of a loss for how this commission is going to coherently present what it thinks needs to be done to the community, whether it's through the coalition or to the council or wherever. I'm a little mystified about how we're going to do that. So I just wanted to make you all aware that I had a concern. We're not going to have time to discuss it tonight. We have 10 minutes left. Gary, I kind of doubt that we're going to be able to deal with the DLCD thing, but I don't remember. Is that something that's absolutely critical to do tonight?
No, we can, I think we should postpone that. I'll try to include at our next meeting a review of the interpretation of the housing goal as a part of this package. So instead of dealing with it in two parts, we'll deal with it in one comprehensive stroke. I was going to add, though, related to both the previous agenda item and this one, that I wonder if the coalition concept should be a part of the SEEP update, that we acknowledge the difficulties that we have with the tools that we have available, and that the coalition is a strategy that will move forward those elements that we can't otherwise move forward as a city government. That seems to kind of help to gel this package that we're working on to answer the question of where do we go from here? And the coalition seems to be at least the most favored approach at this juncture that we've come up with. Certainly there are a broad spectrum of issues that we can't deal with or that we need to build community support for doing, all of which a coalition or a broader community outreach effort would help to solve.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing that I have left on the agenda that I feel we really have to get to tonight is electing a vice chair. So I would like to hear nominations.
Bob, you want to take on another one? Okay. Jeff, you want to take on it?
You can nominate people that aren't here.
Please no.
I'm just wondering if what we might ask for are volunteers, you know, that somebody might say, I would like to do that, and then someone else can nominate them.
What's the job description?
Well, the only
I nominate Jeff.
I second.
The only formal responsibility is like the last meeting where I was clearly under the weather. You have to actually run the meeting. That's the only formal responsibility. What I've requested in the past, and Julian just didn't have the time to do it, was to work with the chair to do agenda formation so that it's not just the result of one brain. Two brains are way better than just one. And so that would be the informal part of the responsibility.
Well, I would certainly love to defer to Ray or Gary, but if they vote thumbs down, I guess I would volunteer.
Sorry, can't do it.
Is there a motion? Tanya,
I nominate Jeff Wyatt to serve as our vice chair.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think he'll do a lovely job. And thank you for offering your time and talents, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
All in favor?
In favor.
I think you
Yes.
will too.
Wonderful.
Jeff, you got to vote.
All right.
It's unanimous.
Hey,
Okay,
Rick,
yeah.
getting back to the SEEP update, would you like some input from us on what we think a SEEP update looks like?
I
Or you
would
want to
love it.
just have a discussion? Maybe if you had that input, then we could go over that in the next meeting.
That would be great. I think having something written that we can bounce off of would be good. I mean, as I think I probably made clear, the outline that was produced in January and that has been somewhat worked towards is my concept, but I'm not wedded to that particular outline or that particular way of doing things.
Well, I'm not
Somebody has
thinking so
another
much of
idea?
the structure, but just the content.
Well, however you want to approach it.
And is this something that we should think about that has to be done every year or every 3 years? What's the frequency?
Stu?
It's supposed to be every 3 years to review.
Yeah.
Is the language.
It's called for, sorry.
I think we have a lot of latitude.
Okay, so we could go with
I
3
wouldn't
years right
feel
now then.
constrained by whatever legalisms there might be. I think we can make things work out as long as you don't get fully out in the weeds.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
that would help to then look at the input the commissioners have of what they think it should look like, or would be a good starting point. All right, thanks.
Bob?
Yeah, I guess that's actually a helpful clarification, Stu, that it calls for a review every 3 years. It doesn't actually call for an update. The code doesn't call for an update. It calls for a review in a periodic 3-year cycle. There's been some reference to update, and we've kind of fallen into this language about an update. But I guess I would like to put on the table whether we really need to be spending the enormous amount of effort that is required to do an update of the whole document and then go through the public engagement process on that and then the approval process on that with the city council. I think I just have some doubts about whether that's a good use of our time and whether it's necessary. I think we've kind of fallen into that rather than, I don't see it in the statute.
Right. So my question is, how will we document what we're doing so that when I go to talk to other organizations, I have a crisp idea of what I'm supposed to say? Tanya, and we have like 2 minutes and we go.
Yeah, we got to jump. I think that we need to get clear on what is the content of what is brought forward to council. We know the adaptation side is weak. It was actually never completely finished, and so it's not. The decision in front of this entity here is there something that can be added to it? Does it want to do I haven't heard anybody say they want to do a major rework of it, but do we want to add detail around implementation, and do we want to do the adaptation work that really wasn't done in the SEEP planning process? But I think that's the first question is what is the content? What do we think is needed right now to position this group and this community to implement the most important things going forward? So if we could try to hammer that out at the next meeting, that I think would be very helpful. And then we could figure out how to get there if we know what we're doing.
And I strongly advise that you refine your thoughts and write them down because we have such limited meeting time. It provides a chance for all the rest of us to read what you've written and provide coherent feedback rather than just batting it around, which would be my preferred alternative, but we're not in a situation where we have lots of time for doing that. Bob, I think you're going to get the last word because we're about to be done.
Yeah, I just want to second and move that we focus on content rather than on structure, because I think that the previous discussions we've had on this had to do with a lot of detailed structure without ever having a discussion of the content. Why do we need this? What do we need?
Okay. I think with that, we're going to have to bring it to a close. Thank you all, and we'll talk again in a month.
Yeah, thanks everyone
Thanks,
for
everyone.
shortening up your time. I appreciate it. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Right.